The footage is hard to watch. June 2009, Los Angeles. A rehearsal stage inside the Staples Center. Michael Jackson, the most famous human being on earth, is dancing. But something is wrong. He's thin, too thin. The costumes hang off him like he borrowed them from someone else. Between takes, he sits quietly at the edge of the stage. He doesn't joke with the crew. He doesn't talk much. He stares at nothing. One of the backup dancers later said she went home that night and cried. She didn't know why. She just knew something was ending. The people around him, the dancers, the directors, the producers, they watched this happen every day, and most of them said nothing. 50 concerts were already sold out. $500 million was riding on this tour. The machine was moving, and Michael Jackson was somewhere inside it, trying to keep up. 2 weeks later, he was dead. This isn't a story about an icon at his peak. This is the story of what happened after the peak. The years most people looked away from. The isolation, the collapse, the war, the silence. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Michael Jackson's final chapter felt darker, stranger, and more tragic than most people ever stopped to realize. March 2009, London, the O2 Arena. Michael Jackson steps onto a stage in front of hundreds of journalists and screaming fans. He's wearing sunglasses. He pumps his fist. He says, "This is it."
This is it.
The crowd goes insane. Within hours, the 50 concert dates sell out. Over 1 million tickets in a single day. It becomes the fastest-selling concert series in history. From the outside, this looked like a triumphant return. The King of Pop was back. But the people closest to him told a different story. Kenny Ortega, the director of the This Is It tour, later described rehearsals where Michael would arrive hours late, or sometimes not at all. When he did show up, some nights he was sharp, focused, electric. Other nights, he could barely hold the choreography he had invented himself 20 years earlier. There were moments during rehearsals where the crew would go quiet, watching him struggle through moves that used to be effortless. The dancers who worked alongside him noticed his weight. His voice, still remarkable, sometimes seemed to come from a body that was running out of fuel. AEG Live, the concert promoter, had reportedly invested tens of millions of dollars in the production. The pressure to deliver was enormous, and Michael, by multiple accounts, felt that pressure like a physical weight on his chest. He told people he was nervous. He told people he wasn't sleeping. He told people he was afraid of failing in front of the world after everything that had happened. Everything that had happened. Because the exhaustion you saw in those rehearsal rooms didn't start in 2009. It started much earlier, and it ran much deeper. The question is, how does someone become so isolated, so afraid, so hollowed out, while being watched by the entire world? The answer starts with a life that had never been normal, not even for a single day. Try to imagine what Michael Jackson's life actually felt like. He couldn't walk through an airport. He couldn't eat at a restaurant. He couldn't take a drive without a motorcade. Every public appearance became a siege. Every window became a camera. Every stranger became a potential threat. By the early 2000s, Michael had essentially stopped living in the world the way you and I understand it. Neverland Ranch, his home in Santa Barbara County, became both a sanctuary and a prison. Sprawling, surreal, filled with animals and amusement rides and memorabilia. It was the home of someone who had never been allowed to be a child and had built one for himself as an adult. But it was also increasingly isolated. The 2003 documentary filmed by Martin Bashir cracked open that isolation for the entire world to judge. The interview aired in over 100 countries. Overnight, Michael Jackson became an object of ridicule and suspicion in ways that clearly devastated him. People who knew him said he watched the documentary and felt profoundly betrayed.
Why do you do this to me?
Then came the trial. In 2005, Michael faced criminal charges that dominated global media for months. He was acquitted on all counts, but the trial had cost him something that a verdict couldn't give back. His reputation was permanently scarred in the public imagination. His finances had been obliterated by legal costs, and perhaps most painfully, his faith in the people around him had been shattered. After the acquittal, he left the United States. He went to Bahrain, then Ireland, then Las Vegas. He moved his children constantly, kept a low profile, and retreated deeper into a world that grew smaller and stranger every year. In Las Vegas, he reportedly lived in rented houses with the curtains drawn for weeks at a time. His children wore masks in public, not for any medical reason, but because Michael was convinced that cameras were everywhere, that recognition meant danger. People who visited him during this period described homes that felt less like houses and more like hiding places. He had trouble trusting new people. Even routine interactions, a grocery run, a car service, required layers of security arrangements that most people couldn't fathom. One former associate described calling him and asking how he was doing. Michael paused for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know who's around me anymore." That was 2007. The man the world had known, the performer, the icon, the unstoppable force of pop culture, had disappeared behind walls, bodyguards, and silence. But here's what most people didn't know. While Michael was retreating from the world wasn't retreating from him. Something much more calculated was closing in. If stories like this stay with you, the ones that fall through the cracks of mainstream coverage, subscribe to KINO. There are still so many Hollywood stories that people stopped paying attention to too soon. In 1985, Michael Jackson made one of the most significant business decisions in music history. He spent $47.5 million to acquire the ATV Music Publishing Catalog, a collection of over 250 Beatles songs, along with thousands of other titles. It was a move that shocked the industry, and it made him one of the most powerful figures in music publishing, but it also made him a target. Over the years, his relationship with Sony Music, his primary record label, deteriorated badly. In 2002, Michael publicly accused Sony's then CEO Tommy Mottola of being a devil and a racist. He organized protests outside Sony's New York offices. He gave interviews where he described the music industry as a machine designed to control and exploit its artists. This was not the behavior of a man playing the game. Sony held partial ownership of his publishing assets through a joint venture. And as Michael's debt grew, from the trial, from Neverland's operating costs, from years of excessive spending, that stake became more and more precarious. By the mid-2000s, Michael Jackson owed hundreds of millions of dollars. He was using his share of the Sony/ATV catalog as collateral for loans. The very thing he had fought hardest to own, the asset that represented his independence, his power, his legacy, was now being used to keep him solvent. Think about what that means. His greatest achievement had become his greatest liability. People close to him said he understood exactly what was happening, that he could feel the ground shifting, that every year without a major release, every year out of the spotlight, was another year the industry had leverage over him. The This Is It tour wasn't just a comeback, it was a deadline. 50 shows, $300 to $500 million in projected revenue, contracts signed, money already moved. There was no version of this story where Michael Jackson didn't perform. He had built an empire. Now the empire owned him. And underneath all of that pressure, his body was already starting to give way. On stage, he was still Michael Jackson. Even in rehearsal, even exhausted, even 30 pounds underweight, the moment the music started, something switched on. The crew described it. The dancers described it. He would move, and the room would hold its breath. The talent was still there, completely intact. But the moment the music stopped, he became someone else. Conrad Murray, the Dr. AEG had hired as Michael's personal physician, later testified that Michael was suffering from severe chronic insomnia, not occasional sleeplessness, a total prolonged inability to enter natural sleep. Murray described Michael begging for propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic, to be administered nightly just so he could rest. Not sleep, rest. Murray testified this had been going on for months. Think about what that means for a moment. A man so wired, so haunted, so unable to turn off, that the only way he could close his eyes was to be chemically rendered unconscious. Every single night. His weight had dropped alarmingly. His immune system was weakened. Former associates described a man increasingly dependent on a small circle of doctors who provided prescriptions and rarely challenged what was happening. On stage, electric. Backstage, disappearing. He was surrounded by people who were paid to be there, and he was completely alone. Those who saw him during the final weeks described two different Michaels. Some days he arrived transformed, present, magnetic, commanding, reminding everyone why they believed. Other days he seemed to be running on something close to nothing. The dancers said they learned to read the room the moment he walked in. Some of them later said they wished they had understood what they were actually watching, that they had asked harder questions, that someone, anyone, had said the word stop. Nobody did. June 23rd, 2009, 2 days before his death, Michael Jackson gave what would be his final full rehearsal performance. People who were there described it as extraordinary. He was focused, powerful, commanding the stage the way he always had. He performed Earth Song with the full production, lights, dancers, staging, and the crew reportedly went silent when it ended. Not because something was wrong, because it was that good. Kenny Ortega sent an email that night saying Michael was back, that the transformation was remarkable, that everything was going to be fine. That email is difficult to read now, because that same night, Michael went home to his rented Holmby Hills mansion. Conrad Murray administered propofol. Michael lost consciousness. At some point during the early hours of June 25th, something went wrong. Murray left the room. When he returned, Michael wasn't breathing. He was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center at 2:26 p.m. on June 25th, 2009. He was 50 years old. 51 concerts had been scheduled to begin in less than 3 weeks. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011. In the months after his death, the rehearsal footage was assembled and released as "This Is It." Audiences around the world watched Michael Jackson dance, laugh, coach his band, hit every note, not knowing they were watching a man in his final weeks, not knowing that behind the camera, behind the performance, behind the smile, he had been chemically dependent, financially desperate, and physically failing. They saw the stage version. They always had. Here's what stays with you. The world wasn't blindsided by Michael Jackson's death. Not really. Everything was visible. The trial, the exile, the erratic interviews, the physical decline, the financial collapse. It was documented, photographed, debated, and broadcast across every platform on Earth. We just chose a different story. We chose the moonwalk, the glove, the mythology. It was easier. It was more fun. And when the darker images appeared, the changing face, the dangling baby, the oxygen tent, we consumed those too, just differently. As spectacle, as punchline, as content. Michael Jackson spent the last decade of his life trying to survive inside a machine that had been built around his image, not his humanity. He was, in the most literal sense, worth more as a symbol than as a person. And when he was finally gone, the machine didn't stop. It just shifted formats. He was 50 years old. He had been performing since he was 5, and in 45 years, the world never once stopped watching long enough to ask if he was okay.